The stellar dominance tore through the fabric of space, its crystalline hull refracting starlight in mesmerizing patterns as it decelerated from hyperspace. Commander Vaporizes stood on the bridge, his scaled hands clasped behind his back as he observed the primitive human settlement through the ship's quantum imaging array. The colony, designated as Terra Nova by its inhabitants, sprawled across the valley floor like a collection of children's building blocks. Tactical analysis complete, Commander. First Officer Zexlar announced, her auxiliary breathing gills fluttering with barely contained excitement. Their defensive capabilities are negligible, primitive kinetic weapons, basic shield technology, and a handful of atmospheric fighters. Nothing that could challenge even our escort vessels, let alone the dominance. Vaporizes' primary heart swelled with pride as he studied his flagship's reflection in the bridge's observation panels. The stellar dominance represented the pinnacle of Craxorn engineering, a vessel 3 kilometers long, powered by an artificial quantum singularity, and armed with weapons that could crack planets. Its very presence had ended wars before they began. Begin standard intimidation protocols, Vaporizes ordered, his voice carrying the characteristic harmonic overtones of the Craxorn ruling caste. Let them witness true power, activate all weapon systems, and establish multiple targeting locks. I want them to feel their insignificance. Deep within Terra Nova's underground research facility, Dr. Madison Brooks was having a spectacularly mundane morning. She stood in her lab, surrounded by artifacts recovered from the cave systems beneath the colony, sipping coffee that somehow managed to taste both burnt and stale. The artifacts, smooth, metallic objects covered in strange geometric patterns, had frustrated her team for months. They were clearly artificial, but their purpose remained a mystery. Another exciting day of staring at space paperweights, she muttered, setting down her coffee mug on a cluttered desk. The colony's board of governors was getting impatient. They'd funded her research for 3 years, expecting breakthrough discoveries about the planet's previous inhabitants. So far, all she had to show for it were theories and a collection of beautiful, but apparently useless relics. The first indication that this day would be different came when her coffee mug began to vibrate. Madison watched, fascinated, as ripples formed in the dark liquid. Then the artifacts started to hum. Dr. Brooks, her assistant, Tom Chen, burst into the lab, his face pale. We're picking up massive energy signatures in orbit. Something big just dropped out of hyperspace. Before Madison could respond, every artifact in the lab simultaneously pulsed with brilliant blue light. The mug she'd been holding slipped from her suddenly numb fingers, shattering on the floor. But she barely noticed. Her attention was fixed on the holographic symbols now floating above each artifact, filling the air with ghostly geometric patterns. "That's new," Tom whispered. The facility's emergency klaxons began to wail. Madison's comm unit crackled to life with the colony governor's voice, tight with controlled panic. "This is an emergency broadcast. An unknown alien vessel has entered orbit and is exhibiting hostile intent. All citizens are to proceed to designated shelter areas. This is not a drill." In orbit, Vaporizes watched with satisfaction as his ship's targeting systems locked onto key colonial infrastructure. The humans' primitive sensors would detect these locks, a carefully calculated move to demonstrate the completeness of their vulnerability. "Sir," Zexlar called out, her tone puzzled. "We're detecting unusual energy signatures from beneath the colony. They're similar to theoretical models of ancient tech, but the readings are off the scale." Vaporizes dismissed her concern with a gesture. "Irrelevant. Probably malfunctioning human equipment. Proceed with the intimidation protocol." Back in her lab, Madison stared at the pulsing artifacts with growing excitement and terror. The symbols floating above them were shifting, combining, forming patterns that tickled something in the back of her mind. This was what she'd been waiting for. Proof that these weren't just decorative relics. But why now? What had triggered them? As if in answer, one of the larger artifacts split open like a blooming flower, revealing a crystal core that blazed with internal light. And Madison Brooks, leading xenorchaeologist of Terra Nova, felt her world tilt on its axis as she realized she wasn't studying the remains of an alien civilization. She was standing in the middle of something far more significant, humanity's forgotten legacy. Don't touch anything. Madison's warning came too late. Tom Chen, driven by scientific curiosity, had already reached for one of the glowing artifacts. The surge of energy was instantaneous and devastating. A brilliant flash of blue-white light filled the lab, and Tom's body crumpled to the floor, wisps of acrid smoke rising from his lab coat. Madison rushed to her colleague's side, but one look at his face told her everything. Tom Chen was dead, his features frozen in an expression of surprised wonder. Where his hand had touched the artifact, strange burn patterns spread across the floor like frost on a winter morning, forming intricate geometric patterns that matched the floating holographic symbols above. Dr. Brooks, the colony governor's voice crackled through her comm unit again. I need answers. What the hell is happening down there? Madison keyed her comm with trembling fingers. Governor Williams, we have a situation. The artifacts are active, and she swallowed hard. We've lost Tom. Some kind of energy discharge. But these aren't just random reactions. The patterns, they're forming something. A message, maybe. In orbit, Commander Valthek's satisfaction was interrupted by increasingly urgent reports from his science officers. Commander, the energy signatures are intensifying. Zexler reported, her auxiliary gills now fluttering with concern rather than excitement. They're forming coherent patterns that our systems can't interpret. This isn't consistent with known human technology. Valthek strode to the science station, his scaled skin reflecting the red warning lights now flashing across the bridge. Explain. The energy patterns. Zexler brought up a holographic display. They're similar to theoretical weapons systems from the Age of Ascension. But that's impossible. No primitive colony should have access to such technology. The commander's secondary heart began to beat faster. The Age of Ascension was a period of legend, when ancient civilizations wielded powers that modern science could barely comprehend. But these were humans, barely space-capable primitives who still relied on chemical rockets and kinetic weapons. In the underground lab, Madison worked frantically to document the expanding pattern of symbols. The holographic displays had multiplied, filling the air with ghostly blue text that shifted and changed like living things. Her translation software was overwhelmed, but something about the patterns resonated with her on an almost instinctive level. They're not just symbols, she muttered, recording everything on her tablet. They're keys, fragments of something bigger. Her eyes widened as several symbols aligned into a recognizable pattern. No, that's impossible. The pattern matched prehistoric cave drawings found on Earth, symbols that had been dismissed as primitive attempts at astronomy. But here they were, rendered in advanced holographic form, pulsing with energy that could kill with a touch. Governor Williams burst into the lab with 2 security officers, their weapons drawn. He stopped short at the sight of Tom's body and the ethereal light show filling the room. Dr. Brooks, the alien vessel is powering up weapons. We're detecting targeting locks on every major infrastructure point in the colony. I need to know if what's happening down here is connected. Madison barely heard him. The symbols were shifting faster now, and she could almost understand them, almost hear them. It was like remembering a language she'd never known she'd forgotten. The children must not remember until they are ready, she whispered, translating one sequence. We are the children. Humanity. We're the children. Above the colony, Valthek made his decision. Launch probe drones. I want detailed scans of those energy signatures. Whatever technology these humans have stumbled upon, the Kraxorn Empire will claim it. As the drones descended through the atmosphere, new symbols blazed to life in Madison's lab. These were different. Sharp, aggressive, pulsing with red energy. Warning signals. The artifact that had killed Tom began to transform, its surface flowing like liquid metal. As Madison watched in fascinated horror, It reconstructed itself into something new. Something that looked very much like a control interface, sized perfectly for a human hand. "Dr. Brooks," Governor Williams said quietly, "what exactly have you found down here?" Madison reached for the interface, her hand steadied, despite the fear coursing through her. "Not what," she corrected. "Who? We're about to meet our ancestors." Commander Valthek's secondary heart stopped beating for a full second as the probe's data streamed onto his command display. His primary heart compensated with rapid, thundering beats that sent waves of cold dread through his body. He recognized these energy signatures from his military academy days, from lectures about the mythical world breakers. "Impossible," he whispered, scale fingers tracing the familiar patterns. The world breakers were legends, weapons so powerful they had erased 3 ancient empires from existence. Their energy signatures were studied by every Craxorn commander as a warning. Some technologies were too dangerous to exist. "Sir," Zexalar's voice quavered, her usual confidence shattered. "The humans, they're activating more systems. The energy readings are approaching Class X levels." In the underground laboratory, Madison Brooks stood before the transformed artifact, her hand hovering over its surface. The interface pulsed with an inner light that seemed to reach for her fingers like tendrils of luminescent mist. "Dr. Brooks," Governor Williams warned, after what happened to Tom. "This is different," Madison interrupted, her voice distant, almost dreamy. "The first activation was defensive, triggered by Tom's unregistered genetic pattern. But this," she traced the flowing symbols with her other hand, "this is calling to me, to us. Look at the symbols. They're not just similar to ancient human writing systems. They're the source of them." The interface responded to her proximity, projecting new holographic symbols that swirled around her like a cosmic dance. But these weren't just random patterns. They were forming images, star maps, technical diagrams, and something that looked disturbingly like a weapon schematic. "By all the void spirits," one of the security officers breathed, lowering his weapon in awe. "Is that our galaxy?" It was, but not as they knew it. The holographic map showed familiar spiral arms, but they were divided into sectors, each marked with symbols that pulsed with authority. At the center, Earth's solar system glowed like a beacon. "Not our colony point," Madison realized, her voice thick with emotion. "Not our refuge. Our origin. Our throne." In orbit, Valthek made a decision that would haunt him for the remainder of his shortened life. Launch the primary scan probes. Full spectrum analysis. If these are truly world breaker signatures, we must know. The probes descended through Terra Nova's atmosphere like metallic raindrops, their sensors probing deep into the planet's crust. As they passed through the layers of rock and soil, they revealed a truth that sent Valthek staggering back from his display. The colony wasn't built on top of a weapons cache. It was built on top of a fortress. A facility so vast it encompassed half the planet's mantle, its architecture unmistakably similar to ruins found on worlds that had been ancient when the Craxorn were still climbing out of their primordial oceans. In the lab, Madison finally understood. Her hand pressed against the interface, and knowledge flooded her consciousness. Not like a computer download, like remembering, like waking up. "We didn't just find this world," she told the stunned governor. "We were led here. Those navigation charts that brought our colony ships, the mysterious signals that suggested this planet, they were breadcrumbs. Tests," she laughed, a sound of wonder and disbelief. "We weren't colonizing. We were coming home." The facility's lights shifted to a deep, pulsing purple. New rooms revealed themselves as hidden doors I rised open. And from somewhere deep below, a sound began to build, a thrumming that seemed to resonate with the human bones themselves. "Dr. Brooks," Governor Williams said carefully, "what exactly are we dealing with here?" Madison turned to him, her eyes reflecting the purple light like stars. "This facility isn't a ruin, Governor. It's a seed bank, a backup system. Our ancestors didn't just leave us technology. They left us our history, our legacy. Her voice dropped to a whisper. And if I'm reading these symbols correctly, they left us something else. Something the Kraxorn are about to wish they'd never discovered. Above, Valthek stared at his tactical display as more energy signatures bloomed across the planet's surface. And for the first time in his decorated military career, the commander of the Stellar Dominance knew true fear. The humans weren't primitives who had stumbled upon ancient weapons. They were the ancient weapons, finally remembering how to wake up. Madison's fingers danced across the control interface, following patterns that felt as natural as breathing. Each touch sent cascades of information through her mind. Not overwhelming, but familiar, like remembering a childhood home you'd thought long forgotten. "This can't be right," she muttered, scanning the data streams. According to these readings, this facility is over 300,000 years old. That predates known human civilization by. The interface pulsed, and a new hologram materialized in the center of the lab. Unlike the abstract symbols, this was a human figure, a woman in her 50s, wearing clothing that somehow managed to look both ancient and impossibly advanced. Her appearance was so sudden that the security officers raised their weapons instinctively. "Hello, children," the figure said, her voice carrying both warmth and infinite sadness. So they finally returned. Governor Williams stepped forward. "Who are you? What are you talking about?" The hologram smiled, but its eyes remained fixed on Madison. Was Dr. Elena Valdez, Chief Administrator of Defense Installation 01. "And you," she gestured to include everyone in the room, "are my descendants, though you've forgotten more than just my name." In orbit, Valthek watched with mounting horror as his sensors detected a massive power surge from the colony. "Battle stations," he barked. "Raise all shields. Prepare for—" "Sir," Zexlar interrupted, her auxiliary gills now completely still, a sign of extreme distress in their species. "The surge, it's not weaponry. It's a quantum consciousness imprint activating. Someone is waking up." Back in the lab, Dr. Valdez's hologram continued. "We knew they would come back eventually. The hunters. The destroyers. The ones who couldn't bear the thought of humanity achieving its true potential. The Kraxorn." Madison asked, but the hologram shook its head. "No, the Kraxorn are children themselves, playing with powers they barely understand. But their presence has triggered our defensive protocols, and now—" The hologram's eyes seemed to look through time itself. "Now you must remember. Quickly." The facility shuddered as more systems activated. Through the neural link established by the interface, Madison saw them all: defensive arrays, power cores, and things she had no words for, all awakening from their ancient slumber. 300,000 years ago, Dr. Valdez continued, humanity didn't just rule Earth. We ruled galaxies. We had mastered physics your current scientists haven't even theorized yet. We were approaching what you might call godhood." Her expression darkened. "And that's when they found us." "Who found us?" Governor Williams demanded. "We never knew their true name. They existed in dimensions we could barely perceive. But they hunted by tracking advanced thoughts. The more evolved a species became, the more they stood out like beacons in the dark." In orbit, Valthek received the translated portions of the quantum transmission. His scales paled to a sickly white. "All ships, withdraw. Immediate retreat. We've wandered into something far beyond our—" "Sir!" Zexlar's cry cut through his order. "More power signatures. The entire planet. It's transforming." The hologram of Dr. Valdez raised her hand, and the lab's walls became transparent, revealing the massive machinery awakening beneath the colony. "We had a choice," she said. "Fight and face extinction, or hide. So we hid our children. You, on Earth, erased our own memories, rebuilt your civilization from scratch, guiding it slowly, carefully to avoid detection. But we left guardians, watchers, seeds of our true power, waiting for the right moment." Madison felt tears rolling down her cheeks, though she couldn't have said why. And now, Dr. Valdez's hologram smiled. You take your first step back to the stars. The Kraxorm's aggression has triggered this facility's defense protocols. Through you, Madison Brooks, we will remind them why humanity once made empires tremble. The interface under Madison's hand grew warm, and knowledge flooded her mind. Not just data, but memory, heritage, power. Above, Valthek watched in helpless horror as massive structures began rising from the planet's surface, each one a weapon platform that made his mighty flagship look like a child's toy. The children of Earth were about to remember who they really were. And the universe would never be the same. The ground trembled beneath Terra Nova Colony as ancient machinery stirred to life. Through her connection to the interface, Madison felt each activation like a new synapse firing in her brain. Massive structures burst from the Earth, their surfaces shedding millennia of soil and rock as they rose toward the stars. The genetic key has been accepted, Dr. Valdez's hologram announced, her form now crackling with barely contained energy, initiating full neural integration. Madison Brooks, are you prepared to accept your inheritance? Before Madison could respond, Governor Williams stepped forward. Wait, Dr. Brooks is a civilian. She's not trained for. On the contrary, Dr. Valdez interrupted, she's been training for this her entire life. Why do you think she was drawn to archaeology? To the study of humanity's past. The markers in her genetic code have been guiding her since birth. In orbit, the stellar dominance's sensors were overwhelmed by the scale of what was emerging from the planet's surface. Where there had been mountains, now stood towers of impossible height, their surfaces rippling with energy fields that defied known physics. What had appeared to be natural valleys revealed themselves as docking bays large enough to house fleets. By the void, Zexlar whispered, the entire colony was built on top of a fortress world. Valthek finished, his voice hollow. We haven't discovered a primitive settlement. We've awakened a sleeping giant. Madison gasped as the neural interface expanded its connection. Information flooded her consciousness. Not raw data, but generations of memories, skills, and knowledge. She saw the rise of human civilization across the galaxies, the development of technologies that treated the fundamental forces of the universe like musical instruments to be played. The process cannot be stopped, Dr. Valdez warned as Madison staggered under the mental load. Your mind must adapt or burn out. Focus on your breathing. Let the memories flow through you, not into you. Governor Williams watched helplessly as Madison's eyes began to glow with the same ethereal light as the artifacts. The security officers had long since lowered their weapons, rendered meaningless in the face of such power. Through the neural link, Madison felt the defense platforms rising into orbit. Each one was a masterpiece of engineering, powered by artificial quantum singularities, and armed with weapons that could rewrite the laws of physics in localized areas. She understood now why they had been hidden, why humanity had chosen to forget. The stellar dominance is powering up its main weapon array, Dr. Valdez announced calmly. They believe their planet cracker technology can overwhelm our defenses. Madison, show them why that assumption is unfortunate. Madison's consciousness expanded through the Fortress World systems. She saw the Kraxorn flagship through 1,000 different sensors, each one analyzing its strengths and weaknesses. The ship's hull was indeed impressive, a crystalline lattice that could withstand the fury of a star's corona. But to the weapons now at her command, it might as well have been paper. Commander, Zexlar's panic cut through the stellar dominance's bridge. The human structures, they're not just defense platforms. They're rewriting local spacetime. Valthek watched in horror as reality itself seemed to bend around his mighty ship. The crystalline hull began to resonate at frequencies that shouldn't have been possible, creating harmonics that threatened to tear the vessel apart. In the lab, Madison opened eyes that now shone with the accumulated knowledge of humanity's true heritage. You wanted to see our defensive capabilities. Her voice echoed with power that had slept for 300 millennia. "Let me show you why the hunters forced us to hide." Dr. Valdez's hologram smiled proudly. "The children remember," she said softly. "And now, the galaxy will remember too." Around Terra Nova, more facilities were awakening. Across the planet's surface, hidden installations burst into life, each one a testament to the heights humanity had once achieved. And in orbit, the mighty stellar dominants faced a terrible truth. They hadn't found a primitive civilization. They had found humanity's alarm clock. And it was time to wake up. Commander Valthek had faced death before. He'd stared into the void during the Battle of Seven Suns, commanded ships through asteroid fields dense enough to shred shields, and survived 3 assassination attempts from rival houses. But he had never known fear like this. Primary weapons, fire. He roared, his scaled skin reflecting the emergency lights that bathed the stellar dominance's bridge in blood-red hues. The command was born of desperation, of pride, of the terrible knowledge that retreat would mean not just defeat, but the end of everything the Kraxorn Empire believed about their place in the cosmos. The flagship's planet Cracker Beam lanced out, a stream of concentrated physics-breaking energy that had shattered worlds. It struck the nearest defense platform and stopped. In the underground lab, Madison Brooks watched through 1,000 sensor arrays as the beam was caught in a containment field that hadn't existed seconds before. The knowledge flowing through her neural interface told her exactly what was happening. The ancient defenses weren't just blocking the attack, they were analyzing it, dissecting it, learning its secrets. "Fascinating," she said, her voice carrying harmonics that made the security officer's teeth ache. "Their weapon design is actually quite elegant. Primitive, but elegant, like a stone axe crafted by a master." "Madison," Dr. Valdez's hologram warned, "don't play with them. End this." Through the neural link, Madison felt the defense platforms powering up their primary systems. The technology was beyond anything humanity currently possessed. Weapons that didn't just damage their targets, but rewrote the underlying structure of reality itself. On the Stellar Dominance's bridge, Zexlar screamed, "Commander, they're reflecting the beam, but they're doing something to it." Valthek watched in horror as his ship's most powerful weapon was caught, twisted, and turned back upon them. But it wasn't just reflected. It was transformed. The energy signature had been altered at a fundamental level, changed into something that bypassed every defense the Kraxorn had developed over millennia of warfare. "Impossible," he whispered, as the modified beam struck his flagship's crystalline hull. "Our shields are at maximum power. Our hull is designed to." The beam passed through the Stellar Dominance's defenses as if they didn't exist. Where it touched the crystalline hull, reality itself seemed to hiccup. The atomic bonds holding the mighty vessel together didn't break. They simply forgot they had ever existed. Madison observed the process through the Fortress World sensors, understanding exactly what was happening. The defense platforms hadn't just reflected the attack. They had evolved it, transformed it into something that operated on principles the Kraxorn couldn't begin to comprehend. "The hull is unraveling at the quantum level." Zexlar's voice cracked with panic. "It's not being destroyed, it's being unmade." Valthek watched sections of his mighty flagship simply cease to exist, transforming into clouds of component particles that dissipated into space. There was no explosion, no dramatic detonation, just the quiet, inexorable dissolution of the most powerful warship in the Kraxorn fleet. "Fascinating," Madison mused, monitoring the disintegration through multiple dimensional sensors. The defense systems aren't just destroying their ship. They're erasing the very possibility of its existence from local spacetime. In the lab, Governor Williams stared at the holographic display showing the Stellar Dominance's death. Are we killing them?" Dr. Valdez's hologram shook her head. The defense systems detected their escape pods launching. "This is not a war of extinction. It is a reminder. The children of Earth need not destroy their enemies. Sometimes, simply showing them the gulf between their understanding and ours is enough. The mighty stellar dominance, pride of the Kraxorn Empire, didn't explode or break apart. It simply unraveled, its structure dissolving into constituent particles as fundamental forces forgot it had ever been more than scattered atoms in the void. Through it all, Madison felt no triumph, no bloodlust, only a deep, ancient sadness and the weight of knowledge that humanity had hidden away for 300 millennia. "The message has been sent," she said softly, watching the escape pods flee into hyperspace. "The galaxy will know that humanity has remembered itself." Dr. Valdez nodded solemnly. "And now, the real work begins." The escape pods from the stellar dominance streaked across the system, their occupants broadcasting warnings in every known frequency. Behind them, the quantum particles that had once been their mighty flagship continued to disperse, creating an ethereal cloud that sparkled like stardust in Terra Nova's orbit. Madison Brooks stood in what had revealed itself to be the Fortress World's central command center, surrounded by holographic displays showing activity across hundreds of light years. Through the neural interface, she felt other installations awakening. Dormant facilities scattered across human space, each one responding to the signal from Terra Nova. "There are so many," she whispered, watching the network of ancient outposts spring to life. "Mars, Europa, Proxima, every colony world we thought we discovered. We led you to each one," Dr. Valdez's hologram confirmed. "The mysterious signals that drew human exploration, the lucky discoveries of habitable worlds, all carefully planned. Each colony was placed atop a sleeping fortress, waiting for the right moment." Governor Williams, who had insisted on accompanying Madison to the command center, stared at the displays in awe. "Why? Why make us forget? Why let us stumble around in the dark for thousands of years?" The hologram's expression turned grave. "Because the hunters are still out there. The ones who forced us into hiding. They exist partially in dimensions we can barely perceive, drawn to advanced consciousness like moths to flame. The more evolved a species becomes, the more they stand out." Madison nodded, understanding flowing through the neural link. "So we hid our light, became primitive again, started over." "Not just that," Dr. Valdez corrected. "We divided ourselves. The consciousness that once made us mighty was split, scattered across billions of minds, each one holding just a fraction of what we once were. The hunters couldn't track us because we were too simple, too basic." Through the Fortress World sensors, Madison detected the Kraxorn escape pods entering hyperspace. Their warning messages were already being picked up by distant outposts. Tales of a demon world that had unmade their greatest ship with casual ease. "They'll return," Governor Williams warned. "The Kraxorn Empire won't let this stand." Madison smiled, but there was ancient sadness in it. "No, they won't return. Not after what their sensors recorded. Their scientists will study that data for decades, trying to understand how we unraveled their ship's atomic structure. But they'll never decode it, because their minds aren't ready for such knowledge." On the displays, more fortress worlds were awakening. Each activation triggered others, creating a cascade of remembrance across human space. Through the neural interface, Madison felt the stirring of countless minds as dormant genetic markers activated, calling the children of Earth back to their heritage. "The hunters forced us to hide," Dr. Valdez said softly, "but they also taught us patience. We scattered our consciousness across generations, letting it slowly recombine, evolve in new ways. The humans of today aren't just our descendants. You're our improvement." "And now?" Governor Williams asked. "Now," Madison replied, her voice carrying echoes of ancient power, "we remember. Not all at once, that would draw their attention. But slowly, carefully, we'll reclaim what was lost. The fortress worlds will help defend us while we grow into our heritage." Through the neural link, she accessed records that made her breath catch. Star maps showing the true extent of humanity's ancient empire, technological databases that treated the fundamental forces of reality like programming languages, and histories that spoke of achievements that current science would call impossible. The Craxorn didn't find a primitive colony today, Dr. Valdez's hologram stated. They found humanity's alarm clock. And now that we're beginning to wake up, the galaxy will remember why they once called us the children of giants. On the displays, more signals appeared, other colonies reporting similar awakenings, other minds beginning to remember. The fortress worlds were sharing their knowledge, not in a flood, but in a carefully controlled flow that would take generations to complete. Madison felt tears on her cheeks as the weight of history flowed through her. "We're going home," she whispered. "The long night is finally ending." Dr. Valdez nodded, her holographic form beginning to fade. "No, child, you're not going home. You're going to build something even greater than what we lost." And across human space, the children of Earth began to remember who they really were. The news spread across the Craxorn Empire like a shockwave through space. The surviving crew of the Stellar Dominants transmitted their sensor logs to every major world in their territory. The footage showed their mightiest warship being unmade by weapons that operated on principles their most advanced scientists couldn't begin to comprehend. In the Imperial Palace on Crax Prime, the High Council watched in stunned silence as the recording played for the 12th time. The crystalline hull of their flagship, technology that had taken centuries to perfect, simply forgot how to exist. "Impossible," one counselor whispered, his scales pale with fear. They were primitives, barely space-capable. "No," the Imperial Archfist interrupted, her ancient voice carrying across the chamber. "We were the primitives. We just didn't know it." Back on Terra Nova, Madison Brooks stood atop the highest spire of the now-revealed fortress world, looking down at the transformed landscape. The colony buildings seemed tiny now, nestled between towers that stretched into the upper atmosphere. Through the neural interface, she felt the pulse of ancient machinery, the steady heartbeat of power that had slept for 300 millennia. "The first wave of genetic activations is complete," she reported to Governor Williams, who had refused to leave her side despite the dizzying height. "Across every human colony, people are beginning to remember. Not everything, just enough to start understanding." The governor nodded, watching distant defense platforms reconfigure themselves in a hypnotic dance. "And the hunters, the ones who forced us into hiding, still out there," Madison confirmed. "But we're stronger now, smarter. When they finally notice us again, they'll find we've learned new tricks during our long sleep." Through her enhanced senses, she detected hyperspace ripples as the last Craxorn ships fled the sector. Their warning broadcasts had already reached half the known galaxy. "Beware the demon world that destroyed the stellar dominance. Beware the humans who command powers beyond understanding." In the command center below, Dr. Valdez's hologram interfaced with newly awakened systems, coordinating the careful distribution of knowledge across human space. "We can't restore everything at once," she explained to the gathered colonial officials. "Too much, too fast would draw attention. But we can teach you to walk again, and then to run, and then." She smiled, and in that smile was the promise of stars. Madison felt the truth of it through the neural link. Humanity hadn't just hidden their power. They had used their time in darkness to evolve. Each generation had carried fragments of the whole, combining and recombining in new ways. The consciousness that was awakening now was both ancient and new, tempered by millennia of growth. "We're receiving transmissions from Mars Colony," one of the technicians announced. "Their fortress world is fully activated. Europa Station reports the same. The defensive network is coming online across human space." Governor Williams shook his head in wonder. "All this time, we thought we were reaching for the stars. But we were just coming home." Madison nodded, but her attention was drawn to a particular data stream, a signal coming from deep space, far beyond the edges of known territory. Through the fortress world's enhanced sensors, she recognized it for what it was: another sleeping giant, waiting to be found. "We're not done exploring," she said softly. "We just understand now why we feel so drawn to certain stars, certain worlds. The map home was written in our genes all along." As if in response, the defense platforms adjusted their configuration, forming patterns that echoed the sacred geometries found in human art across millennia. We had been drawing these shapes, building these patterns, speaking these rhythms since the beginning. All of it muscle memory from a civilization that had chosen to forget. "The long night is over," Madison announced, her voice carrying through the fortress world's communication systems to every human colony in range. "It's time for humanity to remember what daylight feels like." And across human space, the children of Earth looked up at the stars with new eyes, finally understanding why they had always felt like they could reach them. It wasn't the end of human history. It was just the end of their long dream of being small.